Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome to Spirit Speakeasy. I'm Joy Giovanni, Joyful Medium. I'm a working psychic medium, energy healer, and spiritual gifts mentor. This podcast is like a seat at the table in a secret club, but with mediums, mystics, and the spiritual luminaries of our time. So come behind the velvet ropes with me and see inside my world as I chat insider style with profoundly gifted souls. We go deep, share juicy stories, laugh a lot, and it wouldn't be a speakeasy without great insider secrets and tips. You might even learn that you have some gifts of your own. So step inside the Spirit Speakeasy. Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome back to another episode of Spirit Speakeasy. I'm your host, Joy Giovanni. It's so good to be here with you today. This is one of our solo chats. In today's episode, I'm going to share something that I don't normally talk a lot about. As most of you know, I am a medium and I connect with other people's loved ones in the spirit world during their readings and sessions. Sometimes I'm connecting psychically with the energy of my sitter. Sometimes I'm connecting with their loved ones in the spirit world and understanding their soul. But this is a little different. So as a medium, I'm able to connect with other people's loved ones. I'm also, we're all able to connect with our own loved ones, as I'm often saying. But sometimes I can also become aware of other people. We've talked recently on this podcast about why some places might seem more haunted than others, and how spirit people aren't stuck or bound or locked into a physical place, but they can travel about. They can visit places that they are interested in or that they knew in their life, or for any reason or no reason at all. They can be visiting the person that lives there if they have some connection to them, or they can just be visiting the place. And that is what we're going to talk about today, an experience that I had pretty recently. The way I'm saying it to myself is my new friend. So I have made friends with, why wouldn't we be friends? But I have started communicating with, receiving information from a spirit woman who has been visiting me in my home. I'm trying to articulate this in the best way. I guess if someone's going to judge this work, I guess any of it could sound crazy if they don't understand it. But this experience was a little different for me than others that I've had. So I'm just going to tell you the story of what happened. I'm going to tell you some of the elements, and then I'm going to tell you the validations that I received. It's a little bit unusual. So I've been living in this place, this property that I live in for the last, not quite 3 years, but almost. And I've several times been aware of spirit people in this house. Some of them have been my own loved ones who've crossed over to the other side. I have a lot of friends and family on the other side. And some of them have been people that, and when my daughter lived here, she's become aware of them too, feel like they know this place, this house, right? And her and I have kind of compared notes on what we felt, or, what we thought the person might be about, where they, there's one in particular that feels like a gentleman. He feels tall. He feels like he knows this house itself. I haven't communicated much directly with him, but both she and I have felt him on several occasions. And then there are a couple female souls that we've recognized in the house that don't necessarily feel like they belong to our family or friend group that's on the other side. And as a medium, I don't think much of it, because I know that souls are around all the time. Some we know and some we don't, and some that just take interest in whatever we're working on, or it's not super uncommon for other people's souls to be around, especially because of the work that I do. But I didn't necessarily spend any time to intentionally connect in any way. Well, as most of you know, if you are a regular listener, I recently was going on a trip. I went to New Orleans, which I talked about a few episodes ago. And this was the week that I was getting ready to go. Any of you that are a small business owner or have a job with a lot of responsibilities know that sometimes to take a few days off, there's like a lot of prep work you have to do and a lot of stuff that you got to, like, had to set up a bunch of emails and make sure that I was, kind of ahead on my computer work and more of the admin side of things. So I was staying up kind of late that week into the night to get all the things done, so I could be prepared for my trip, so I could just have a good time and just be answering emails while I was gone. I was also getting set up for that free workshop that we did, so I had a lot going on. And I actually was in the room that I am now where I record these podcasts. Now I used to record them in my room, and now I record them in the office, which used to be my daughter's room. And so I was in here. I actually like the space quite a bit. I've been decorating it and repurposing some old furniture and painting furniture in here and just having a good time and really making the space feel like my own so I can work in here. So it's pretty comfortable for me to be in here. I like working in here. And I was in here, like I said, it was kind of late at night and I was just finishing up some stuff on the computer. I was starting to get a little tired, but was still very much awake, but uh truthfully my eyes are a little bit sensitive, so sometimes after a long time on the computer, my eyes start to get tired, and itchy and red and droopy. Anyway, so it was maybe I'm a bit of an early bird these days and try to be in bed at a reasonable hour, but it was probably 10 o'clock at night and I was still in here trying to finish up some things and working on some creative projects. And all of a sudden, um, I just started hearing kind of some unusual noises in the room and I didn't really think much of it. It's an older place and sometimes as where I am in Southern California, the temperature can change a lot between day and night. So sometimes the house will make quote unquote settling noises or just, little noises. It's a historic place. So it's, has some old features and they make little noises sometimes. So I didn't think much of it. But then as I continued to work on the left side of my forehead, kind of near my temple above my eyebrow, in a space about 2 inches or so long, I started to feel a pressure. Now, it wasn't a pressure from inside like a headache. It was a pressure like if someone was pressing two fingers against my head. It kind of, but in more of a straight line. It didn't feel like two separate, like fingers, quote unquote. It felt like a little bit of a straight line, a couple inches long, on my forehead. And it almost felt like I could feel an indentation. It didn't hurt. It wasn't aggressive, but it was recognizable and it was unusual. And it was not like a spasm where it's like in one point, it was across too big of an area. It just struck me as unusual. And the pressure was increasing, like almost if someone was pressing on me for just like maybe like 60 seconds. It wasn't terribly long. And then I stopped and I acknowledged it and I kind of said like, hello, like, hi. I recognize someone's here. This is not the way that I usually receive my hellos. So this was just unusual. And I wasn't scared at this point. I recognize that there are lots of things that I maybe can't see with my physical eyes, and it doesn't mean they're scary. So just kind of said hello, and then it released, and I was like, okay, so hi, I get it. Like, you're here, hello. And then I started to hear one of the lights that I use clicking in an unusual way. These lights don't make noises; they're new. Um, they I'm with them a lot and they just don't ever really make noises. So I thought it was a little bit unusual. But I just was like, okay, I wonder if I can communicate using these sounds that are happening in this room around me and with the lights and with, all the things in this room. And I just started to ask some questions. Again, normally this is not the way I communicate. When I'm aware of a soul or a spirit person, I move my awareness, I blend my soul's energy with their soul's energy, and I start to discern and understand things about them through my subtle senses. This was not like that. This was me aware of someone in the room who I was aware of a physical sensation to get my attention. And then I started just asking questions. And I was asking him out loud, which I really don't normally do. So I'm in this room by myself asking questions out loud. And I started to ask things like, because like I said, we've known that there are some souls that visit in this house that aren't our family, that probably go to this house in some capacity. So I wanted to know, are you a person that belongs to this place, or are you a person that belongs to me? And then the way I did it was I said, make one noise if you belong to this place and make two noises if you belong to me. And then it was one noise. And I was like, and it was a pretty loud, unusual, the lights I use in here have LED little tiny bulbs. They don't make noise. I don't use the overhead with a light bulb in this room. It just doesn't work well. So there were strange pops coming from the light. But it was just one significant noise. And I was like, okay, so you go to this place. You're not someone that I know. And then I had asked, did you pass away in this place? And I think I said one noise for yes and two noises for no. And I think I got one noise again. So it was like, okay, yes, they passed away in this place, or near this place, this area. And then I wanted to know, did you pass away recently, like within the last 100 years, or because my place is almost 100 years old, or did you pass away? Has it been longer than that? I don't think I said much longer. I said, 100 years, within the last 100 years or longer than that. And again, asked for, one knock for this and two knocks for this, and received two knocks. And it was, more than 100 years. And I was like, okay. Now, where I live, there was the Crusades, which is what actually still exists here, is a monastery that's just, a couple blocks. Sometimes in these videos, maybe not this one because the time of day it is, but you can even hear the bells of the church across the canyon, and there's still a monastery, and there's still the church that goes with it, and there are several churches. So we know that this area was conquered in several ways over several generations. And I wanted to know, is this person, of one of those people that moved to this land, or did this person belong to this land before? The way I asked it was before this land was stolen, because I'm aware of what happened. So, and the answer was that they belonged to this land before it was stolen. And I thought that was just really fascinating. I was aware that this person was a woman. I was aware of generally of her stature when she had a physical body. Obviously, when they're in the spirit world, they no longer have a physical body. And I think I asked her a couple more questions, within that vein of just trying to slightly discern, who is this person and where are they from? And then I was aware that I was becoming really tired and it was going to be time for me to go to bed. So I played the question and answer game out loud with clicking noises in the room for maybe like a half hour or so. That was me just backslamming, banging my ring on the counter here, the table here. So then I went to bed and, just went to sleep and did my normal thing. Got up in the morning, and as many of you might know, I do my meditations in the morning. So I'd gotten up, done my little routine. I like to brush my teeth first because it helps me wake up. I like to turn on the lights and make it where I'm like sitting up so I stay awake during meditation. I call it setting myself up for success, because sometimes it's easy to fall asleep in meditation. So I was doing all that I normally do. And then I sat down to get ready to start my meditation, and I was in my bedroom, and I heard not quite a knock on my bedroom door, but a noise on my bedroom door that almost sounded like it was being closed, but it was already closed. And then I just kind of said like a hello, because I thought that was unusual. And then the door opened just slightly. So it's most likely true that I probably didn't close the door very tight so that it latched. I probably had just closed it. But there's no breeze in my house. I don't leave the windows open overnight. It's actually been quite chilly these last couple months. So there was no breeze that would have caused the door to open. There was no reverse like suction in the air. And the door opened just like 2 or 3 inches, just a little, just a little bit. And then I said hello and actually said thank you, because I don't, in the past, a younger version of me used to scare quite easily, and they know that I like to just be gently alerted sometimes, to their presence. So I said hi and I said, thanks for knocking. And I just got the sensation that she wanted to join me in meditation. And so I invited her in and said, would you like to join me in this meditation? And then I just went back into my meditation just like I would do, and essentially invited her to share the space with me. So what that basically means for me in meditation is just to invite that spirit person to kind of sit in my personal space bubble with me and share her personal space bubble or her auric field or her energy of her soul with me, and to blend souls with mine if she'd like. And so we sat there. I typically do that meditation for the better part of an hour. And as I sat with her, I wasn't intending to there was no questions I was asking. It doesn't work that way for me. I just almost, the way I imagine it or kind of want to word it is just open my heart for anything that they want to share. But it's not really opening my heart. It's blending my soul with theirs and then just being available for anything she might want to share. Anything I could understand about her, any, just whatever she wanted to share in that moment. And I started to receive, for me, often the way it works is a lot of emotion that I can receive and feel and sense. And then I receive quick flashes of mental images, pictures in my mind's eye, and then sometimes words or um, this is a little confusing the way I'm going to say it. Some people use the word download. I don't love that word, but almost like blocks of thought. So almost like if someone gives me a whole chapter of a book all at once, not like I see it closed caption style, but like I just know a whole bulk of information in kind of one moment. So that's the way that my mediumship communication works. And that's exactly the way that this woman was communicating with me. Of course, because of the night before's knocking conversation, I was aware that she was an Indigenous person to this land. And I was actually starting to receive sort of the name of her people. I didn't have it quite right. I knew it was complicated. I knew it started with like a hard C, like a k. I knew there were several syllables, and I knew it was rhythmic, and I had just I couldn't even tell you exactly the way I had it at that time, but I had a version of it that wasn't quite right, and I knew it wasn't quite right, but I got the gist. And then she was showing me this amazing, I kind of was like, well, what can I know about you? That was my, not really a thought, but like, that was what my heart wanted, was like, what can I know about you? Like, hey, new friend, what can I know about you? And I started to see images in my mind's eye, and I was aware of her. It's not really talking like a person would talk out of a voice box, but her sharing information, almost like narrating and saying, um, showing me this amazing way of weaving. And she was taking, in my mind's eye, in these pictures I was seeing, she was taking these long strands of what looked like grass, and weaving them together incredibly tightly. And as I was watching her do this in my mind's eye, it wasn't even quite a thought, but my natural wondering was like, oh, I wonder how you like get that so tight without cutting your fingers or like breaking the grass. And then I heard her say in my mind, oh, you have to pull the sweet grass when it's wet, and you have to weave it tightly when it's wet, and then you can weave it and it dries all together. And the way she was showing it to me, like I said, it wasn't necessarily in English and it wasn't necessarily in words, but she was showing me that you can then weave it so incredibly tightly. And she showed me a basket filled with water. And I was like, wow, that's like really cool. I didn't know that was a thing. And then I continued to sit with her, and she continued to share. And as I mentioned earlier, I live near on these big canyons that we have, which essentially are overlooks or big hills that then make a canyon. And she was showing me how they would walk out and look at the brush. They would get these big shrubs and all this greenery. And I was aware of um, males in her family group or her tribe that were cutting some of the brush and working with it. And then she was showing me fires, in the distance, how they can happen, and how we do get a lot of fires here, and how they would move the brush, is the way I was understanding it, essentially doing some version of uh, intentionally cutting or moving away specific large bushes and plants. And it was so interesting the way she was showing it to me. I just didn't know. I hadn't seen it quite that way before. And then as I just continued to blend my energy with hers, she was indicating, I didn't, like I said, it's not like the reason I'm so hesitant is because it's the way I want to say it is then she said, but it's not really exactly like that. And, I'm always trying to be aware of the languaging around this work because I think it's confusing. And so then I was aware of her sharing information, and the words I was aware of with her was keepers of the medicine, and that was one of her roles in her group, was that she was one of the keepers of the medicine, and that this was part of her role that was passed down from her father, and that she was trained in this natural medicine and this way of healing. And that was one of the roles, the jobs that she did. She was showing me this huge area of land, huge. I mean, that would have covered like much more than just the county that I'm in, several counties wide, like really a really big area of land. I almost could see it like I was up in an airplane looking over like just a really large expanse of land. And the what I was aware of is her showing three different, this isn't going to be quite right the way I say it, but almost like three different camps, like three different, not quite villages, but like city centers almost, of like, this is the center of this area, this is the center of this area. And what I heard her saying was one people, one family living in three villages. That's what I was aware of her sharing. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And I just kind of continued to make not even mental notes, but just have the experience. I'm not necessarily, when I'm in this type of experience, I'm not asking direct questions. I'm not forcing the information or trying to demand information of the soul that's communicating, the spirit person. I'm not trying to lead the conversation. In fact, I'm trying to more intentionally allow her to lead the conversation, because I don't want my mind creating information. I want to be trying to receive everything and not color it myself. So just being available and present and having the experience. So after I was aware of these three villages, she was talking to me about how the land sustains the people, and that they are so grateful for the water and the plant food and the sacred animals and the sacred medicine and the sounds, and that everything is communing at all times. And that we now think everything's very separate, but what they knew then was that everything was communicating in communion, and that there was energy moving between all things at all times, is the way she was showing it to me. And then as we were gazing out over this canyon, over this outlook, she was showing me these sacred mountains. And there were a couple different mountain formations that she was showing me. I have no idea, I sort of know this area, but definitely not well enough to pick out mountain formations. But I was just aware of the shapes that she was showing me, and some different rock formations. And then I was very aware of the emotion and feeling of reverence, and the sense that these were sacred and almost like temples, that there would be specific prayers and ceremony and ritual and gratitude offerings and love and stewardship, I guess is the word I want to use, shepherding, but stewardship of these areas and of this land. And I was aware that she was an elder woman and lived, into her older years. And it was just such an incredible experience. And what I like to do, which my guides and my team knows, and I feel like the spirit people I work with know, I like to receive some specific information that I can go and validate later. And after having this experience with her, my time was kind of coming to an end. I can only stay in meditation so long, and we had a beautiful experience. And I thanked her, and I asked her to continue to visit me as much as she'd like. And we've actually had a few conversations or communications since then. But what I did later was go and research so I could see like what was valid that I received, to kind of like double check myself, to make sure I wasn't making this up. Or I think the validations still feel important to me in my work, especially when it's not a person that I knew, or that someone else, a sitter, like a client or a recipient knew. And so I did a little research, and the word I was receiving for her people was Kumeyaay. And the Kumeyaay tribe is the indigenous tribe of my area, the indigenous people of this area. And actually, one of the things that they are most known for is their basket weaving. And it's even in the research that I found online, and I'll link several of the sites that I looked at in the show notes here, so you can see them. I think it's important to obviously cite my sources. They're known for their baskets, and they had baskets that were woven so tightly that they could hold water. And I just was like, okay, so I'm not making this up. Obviously, there's no way I could have known that. Obviously, I'm receiving this. And she just was able to share so much with me. It was pretty amazing. I'm going to go through some of the validations that I made notes about. And again, I'll cite the sources in the show notes wherever you are listening or watching to this, so you can do some looking yourself. Now, I did learn through the Kumeyaay, it's called the Kumeyaay info page. Pre-contact Kumeyaay Nation in 1769 is estimated that the population at that time of this nation, the Kumeyaay Nation, these people were over 150,000 strong. Up until that time, they were living off the land in harmony with nature, developing their unique culture over thousands of years, and including their language and vast knowledge of the land and indigenous plants and plant medicine, which might not sound so surprising, but it's just an unusual thing. For me, it felt unusual to be receiving. And really, it was the arrival of the Spanish in 1769 and the expansion into the Kumeyaay Indigenous tribal territory in 1798 that changed the way things were here where I live. It was so fascinating too. I mean, it's become increasingly important to me to understand the places we live and the peoples that they originally belonged to and were stolen from. I hadn't actually looked into this yet, even though it was something that was kind of in the back of my mind that I wanted to do and wanted to become more educated about. So I love that this woman was so gracious in coming to me and helping me understand and explaining things to me. I'm going to give you a little bit more. This bit is from one of the Cal State websites. Again, I'll link it below. But it's the location of the Kumeyaay Indian villages varied from ocean to high mountains to desert, all the way from California into what we now know as parts of Mexico, all the way to the Colorado River. And this part was so cool to me. What this data says is that there were 3 subdivisions of the Kumeyaay Nation. I am probably going to butcher these names, so I apologize in advance. It's the Tipai or Tipay, the Ipe, and the I think it's Kamia, the Kumeyaay. What was so amazing about that, as I was reading it in my research, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what she was communicating about: one nation, one family, one people in 3 separate villages or 3 separate centers. And I was just blown away when I was reading this, because I was like, what? They are separated into 3 subdivisions of one nation of people. Like, this is not crazy is not the word, but like, I just thought it was so amazing. And this article goes on to share about, the different regions and which groups were in the different regions. And it was just so amazing because the expansiveness of the land that I was seeing in my mind's eye. Remember how I was saying it almost felt like I was looking from an airplane and seeing how big this land was. And she was showing me where these 3 different, like, quote unquote villages, which looked very large, the way they were and the way they were spread out over this giant area of land. It really is very resonant with this article, and where, the way they were saying that these 3 subdivisions, so to speak, were set apart and set out in this land that was all part of the Kumeyaay Nation. So that felt really validating and incredible to me, because that was a specific and unusual detail that I would have never thought of on my own. But really, the Kumeyaay reached all the way, like I said, from parts of what we now know as like Baja, Mexico, all the way very far up into what we know now as California, all the way to the Colorado River. And they were here, at least 2,000 years ago, which is so amazing. And really, they've done a lot of research. There are still people of the Kumeyaay Nation who are around today, and over the years they did a lot of research. There was something called ethnographic interviews done back in the day in 1955. Again, I'll put the source below. Just some studies of the Kumeyaay and their political structure within their nation. And these interviews were done with a number of Kumeyaay elders. They were conducted, like I said, in 1955. And at that time, there were at least 5 members of that nation that were 95 years old or older. There was at least one person who was 115 years old, and at least 10 others were documented as above 80 years old, and 15 to 20 others above 70 years old. And then there were approximately 20 or more people who were in their 60s during the late 50s and 60s when this research and when these surveys were being done, which is pretty incredible, because like I said, the way she was expressing it to me is that she lived a very long life, much longer than our quote unquote normal life expectancy here and now. And she did feel like quite an elder and quite a wise keeper of the medicine, as she said. And I just thought it was so fascinating to have that communication, and then to get to go validate and learn about her. I have deep reverence and respect for the Kumeyaay people. And I kind of struggle with this, quite honestly, because I, through my own privilege, realized that I benefit from land that was stolen from them, and from this system that was built on, unfair seizure of land and unfair imprisonment of people and war. So I know that this land is theirs in actuality and in my heart. And I know that me being here and living here is benefiting off of that land. So I have some mixed feelings about this. And I think it's important to acknowledge the Indigenous people who who that land belonged to originally, no matter where you live. It's kind of cool. There are lots of ways to research that. You could even put in the zip code of where you live now, and most areas have some database that you can search and understand who originally inhabited the lands that you are living on. But I just thought it was such an interesting way for me to learn this. And I love that she was so willing to communicate with me. She was so gentle, but so wise and so strong all at the same time. Another thing that the Kumeyaay were known for is their stewardship of the land, and the way that they did intentional, what we call now brush clearing, to avoid fires or to help to care for the land. I thought that was pretty amazing. And according to my research and what's available, they were actually very advanced as far as their agriculture and the way that they were germinating and combining seeds to, I'm not super agriculturally knowledgeable, but the gist of it is essentially they were propagating, cross-pollinating seeds, making more resilient grasses, and creating food and their own sources and supplies. And they were quite advanced with the way that they understood water and irrigation, and knowing that they needed to move brush for fire. And so they were very intelligent and, like I said, advanced in the way they understood the land. I did also learn about several sacred natural mountain and rock formations that looked just like the ones I was seeing in my mind's eye. There are so many of them around, and I actually want to start going and paying homage and visiting and giving my respect and making some offerings. Some of them are kind of hard to find. So I'm going to just make a little list and maybe go on a little pilgrimage around my area on my own. They're pretty spread out, but, there are so many of them, and it was pretty amazing to me the way I saw them in my mind's eye. They were specific shapes. It wasn't just like a regular mountain. They had unusual kind of toppers, like unusual little tops, or the way the structure of the rocks were interesting. And lo and behold, it's there in black and white on the internet, that these are sacred places and that these are very specific places that ritual and ceremony and respect would be given. And it was just pretty incredible to get to have this experience. And the other thing I struggled with a little bit was whether or not to share this, because, even though I don't make money off this podcast, it's not like I'm making money off this story. I just feel a deep amount of respect and reverence for this woman, this soul who is sharing this with me, for the privilege I have of taking advantage of this land now, for all the things that happened to the Kumeyaay people. And I didn't want it to feel like I was using it in any way that felt like an exploitation of my relationship with the spirit world or of this Indigenous woman or of this communication itself. So I've actually held on to this for several weeks and kept it to myself, just because, to be quite honest, I wasn't sure how I felt about sharing it, if it was okay to share, if it was appropriate to share, if there was some layer of cultural appropriation if I shared it. And so those were the things I was sitting with and considering. And ultimately, what I decided to do was ask my Kumeyaay friend in spirit here. And a couple different days, I actually asked her for specific signs, or one, I did a specific sign and I received it as like a yes, it's okay to share this, and that there was like approval and agreement, consent, if you will. And then I did another day, just because some of like I'm a little bit extra. I like checks and balances. I like to know things more than once. So I asked, I was in this room again and I asked her to do the knocks again. And I think I said one for no and 3 for yes, because if it was a yes, I really wanted to be certain that it was a yes. Just because, like I said, my loyalty, my integrity, my reverence to this relationship I have with the spirit world is primary and is paramount. And if she had indicated no, that this was just for me and this was not a story to share, I would have not shared this publicly. And so I got the yes. And then actually what happened after that was kind of early in the morning, and I went to get ready. And as I was getting ready, I just, there are several podcasts that I follow. Some I listen to all the time. And I usually have a few new ones in the mix that I'm like trying out to see if I like them. People suggest them to me or I come across them. And there was a new one on my list of like trying out. And I just so happened to click it. It was in my new episodes list or rotation. So I clicked it, and I actually thought they were talking about the history of channeling, because you guys know I'm a channel. I can channel direct voice of spirit. I can channel healing. Many of us do this work. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'd like to hear their version of like the history of channeling. And as I was listening to this episode, it wasn't about the history of channeling at all. It was about channeling history. It was about mediums connecting with spirit people and communicating with them in, these mystical experiences, these meditations, or these blending of souls, these soul to soul communications like mine, and receiving information, and then, getting some details they could validate, going and validating it, and then understanding more about history through these experiences that we can have as mediums. And so for me, that was just such an extra validation from spirit about like, no, you're not the only one that does this. I didn't know. I mean, I know I have some friends that play like this and do these kind of experiments and do these kind of things and push the edges for ourselves and see, because if I can't validate any of the data, then perhaps my mind's created it. Perhaps, there are lots of other things that could have happened. But if it's things that I didn't know, that I haven't studied or learned or researched, and I receive the information and then I can go validate it, that is a version of confirmation. So um, I just thought it was so serendipitous and synchronistic. And for me was definitely my third approval from spirit of like, yes, this is, you're having this experience. You validated it. It is to be shared. Go forth and share. So here I am coming forth and sharing. So that was my experience with this amazing Kumeyaay elder woman who presented herself to me more than once to share bits about her story, bits about her nation, her people, the first people, really of this entire region. And I just thought it was the things that she shared to me were so powerful because I know with the basket weaving piece in particular, I could smell the sweet grass in the experience that I was having. And I could just feel and see the way she was, it was being woven so tightly. And like I said, my immediate reaction as just a person was like, wow, how do you get that so tight? Like that grass, like, isn't it dry? And doesn't it like for me, I'm such a baby that I was like, oh, I would get paper cuts or like grass cuts from that. I don't know. I played outside when I was a kid. I don't know if you did, but I would sometimes like pull the grass or touch the grass and you could get like a thin, almost like a paper cut, like felt like a little razor blade cut in your fingers. So that's where my mind went, was like, oh, like, how do you do that? And then immediately heard a response in my mind of like, oh, you have to get the sweet grass when it's wet and malleable. And then you weave it tightly and then you make what you're making and then you dry it and cure it. And, but it doesn't come like that in a sentence like you and I talk to each other. It comes just in like almost like a little package of information and you just kind of know all of that all at once. So it's pretty incredible the way she was communicating. I'm really grateful and I do feel like I have a new friend and I don't know how long she'll be around and communicating with me. Of course, she's free to be wherever she likes to be. I feel very honored that she has been willing to share with me and communicate, and I hope she continues to do so. I really do have such a reverence and a respect and deep gratitude, and maybe some guilt even for the way that things went and the way that my privilege allows me now to take advantage of the loss of a nation of people for this land to be taken and developed and changed and populated and, all the things historically that have been done. So I have really been sitting with it a little differently, but I was grateful to have a level of permission from the spirit world to share this with you guys because I felt like I wanted to share it, but I just wanted to make sure that, I respected the process and this soul, this person who was so willing to share and communicate with me. And even just to me, it shows such, again, the intelligence of the spirit world because she must know, obviously she knows that I don't like to be scared, that I don't like, I don't like to be startled. I like to, if someone's going to come into my meditation, I like it to be in the morning. And I wouldn't feel comfortable with a door just having a knock on it and then gently opening by itself in the middle of the night. Like I would not, I wouldn't like that very much. So just the way she went about it, her gentleness, her, just the strength and power in her message and in the way she communicated was pretty amazing. I wish I could show you kind of the mental visuals I was getting. Obviously, there's no way for me to do that. And when you're in the experience, you're experiencing them. But after it, it's just a memory. You can't just flip back on that type of experience. So I will continue communicating with her. And I know that she will continue to visit me whenever she likes. And, it's been interesting to me to play with this other way of communicating through like actual audible noises in my room, in my office of things clicking. And I can't even describe some of the noises because these are like one of these lights is like a big standing light, not like a halo light that you use for recording. I have one of those too, but this is just like a room light, I think it's called like a torch light. It's a light that you would put in the corner. It's all LED. And I have several of this like exact same light now. I have two of them in the office and I have one in another room and I've got this one. And so they don't make noises. None of the other ones have ever made any kind of clicking or popping or ticking or clanging or knocking, or and no noise at all, no flexing noise, no expanding noise. And I am the first one to say, like, oh, maybe that was something other than spirit, which is why I kept switching up during that first, session of communication when I was asking for the knocks. It's why I would say, okay, 1 for no and 2 for yes. And then I'd say, okay, 2 for no and one for yes and 2 for no. I was switching it up just to make sure it wasn't me leading or misunderstanding what was happening, or so it was a different experience, and it is one of my favorite things about this work. I feel like I have a lot of favorite things, but it's one of my favorite things that there's always more to explore, there's always more to learn, there's always ways to grow, and I'm willing and I'm here for it, and I just feel really honored and moved about the whole communication. And, I feel like there was a time for a long time that I wouldn't have been comfortable or would have been nervous or would have been too in my own mind or too self doubt or too insecure to communicate in that way. But there's something so special about, I don't know, just the way she was sharing her story with me and the story of her people. And um, the way that she was saying hello and even teaching me a different way with the noises and the knocks in the room. Like I said, it's not normally the way I communicate. I don't normally um, say things out loud. I wouldn't normally ask a question out loud and say 1 for yes and 2 for no or whatever. So I just, like I said, I was a little bit tired and I was like, all right, well, let me just try this since the noises are happening anyway. Let me see what happens. And then I did something funny also within these last, few weeks. I wanted to see, because I was playing again and asking the questions out loud. This is probably going to sound bizarre, but I have an antique dresser that makes lots of noises for no apparent reason at all different times of day and night. Just like taps and knocks and bonks and clicks and for no reason, like I said, even when no temperature change has happened or, when I've been sitting in the room for a long time. So I that furniture, I'm used to making noises. These lights, I'm not. So I was just doing a little bit more communication with her one day, and I decided, I don't normally say these things out loud. So let me see normally the way I would make communications in my mind, right? Like telepathically almost. So psychically, really. So I kind of in my mind was like, if you can understand me when I ask a question non-verbally in my mind, 2 for yes and 1 for no or whatever. Which obviously if it just be no noise, if it was no, because she wouldn't have heard it. So, and I did get my answer. So again, like I don't have to do it out loud. It just was kind of fun. So I could just ask the questions in my mind, but most of the time I don't do it interview style like that. It is me experiencing things in more of a meditative state or various depths of meditation. I'll say it that way. So sometimes it's light meditative state, and then sometimes I can go deeper into a meditative state and experience things a little differently, but still kind of similar. So that's where I was able to see in my mind's eye. It's not quite visions, but like the mental pictures of the grass being woven and the basket being made and the basket holding the water and the, kind of how she was explaining one nation, one people. Actually, the way I wrote it down was one people, one family living in 3 villages or 3 areas, groups. So those things I was able to kind of feel the emotion, hear some words, get some thought. It's technically claircognizance, like blocks of thought or understanding, and see some pictures or like mental movies about it. So it was just a really cool experience. I just wanted to share it with you guys. It is something that anyone who's mediumistic can do. I do like to do it where I'm getting some specific details for validation, but again, I don't demand what those details are to be. How unusual was it, and how intelligent was it that, because that thing about the KUMEYAAY Nation being separated into 3 quote unquote subdivisions is what this paper or study called it. That to me is just never something I would have even thought to ask about or anything that I would have read or studied or even thought about, so I thought it was so fascinating and continues to prove to me the intelligence of the spirit world that she showed me one thing that was very a practical part of her day-to-day life and experience, something that was very more like socio-political or cultural about their group, and then something that was, her age and her work as a medicine keeper. That was something that I could validate, that there were people, of the Kumeyaay Nation that were very old, like that study showed. And then, lastly, the things about, not even lastly, the things about the mountains and the structures and how specific ones looked and the reverence there. And then the way of, working with the specific plants for plant medicine, different types of plants. And I do know just a little bit about plant medicine, as far as like, I think a lot of us know like aloe you can use for a burn or a cut or a scrape or things like that. I am trained in a decent amount of natural wellness in that way. So, but she was showing me a lot of plants I didn't recognize. And then the way that she was showing me the brush and the way that they were moving the big bushes and clearing it and looking out over the canyon and stewarding the land. Those things, even though they were such cool experiences to see in my visualization and experience with her, they were also all things that I could validate in very clear and specific ways. And even though it could feel general of like, well, people make irrigation systems, the intricacy of the details that were available when I did the research was like, wow, actually, this is exactly what I was seeing. I just didn't know I didn't know I was seeing an intricate irrigation system because I didn't recognize it as that. Do you know what I mean? And then when you're hearing it explained, you're like, oh yeah, I guess that's what that was a picture of or a mental movie of. And when I say mental movie, it's just like maybe like a 30-second kind of being able to understand, or like I said, seeing the land from like a bird's eye perspective and how big and expansive it was. So let me know your thoughts about this. I know I've been sharing about a lot of different topics lately. I do love these types of experiences with the spirit world, like I was saying, especially when it's done in a way where there's things we can actually validate. I think that's important, especially if you're doing something that's a little more experimental like this, where it's not like you're communicating with, I don't know, like your grandma, and then there's stuff about your grandma that your family knows for sure. This is actual research that's been done, and people that we know were the first people of this land, the indigenous people of this land. So just really special. And like I said, I encourage you to do a little bit of a search about who are the first peoples of the place where you live, the First Nation, or, the indigenous people or nation of the land where you live. And then perhaps you can invite them into your meditation and just sit in that space with them. I do feel like it's important to mention, I don't demand information of the spirit world, so not demanding of them, but having an open heart and being available if they should choose to share, just like you would with any other person, right? You wouldn't go to a person in the living, especially someone that was an elder of a family or a nation, and say, hey, you have to tell me about this and give me something I can look up. And you just would never communicate that way with another person, especially someone that is to be respected as an elder. So think of it like that, where it's more of just anything they want to share is great. It's not demanding. It's not trying to control or make them share something specific. It's with reverence and respect, and so much gratitude. So I hope this was a cool conversation, or something for you that you are interested to hear about. I will continue to share about these as they come up, and as I get the green light from the spirit world. Like I always say, I work for them, and my first responsibility is to them to the best of my ability. I'm not a perfect person. Of course, I make mistakes and put my foot in my mouth all the time. So much love and deep bow of gratitude to the first people, the Kumeyaay Nation, all of their members and family and loved ones, and land, and so much respect. I am privileged to live and work on their land. So please know that my intention with this episode really is the deepest reverence and respect to not only this woman who communicated with me, but also to the Kumeyaay Nation and its people as a whole. So I hope that this has been interesting for you. Maybe it's opened your mind a little bit wider. It certainly was an experience that opened my mind even wider. I like to think of my mind as pretty wide right now with a good filter, like a good screen door on it. But I let a lot of new things in for pondering. And, if you're available for it and you continue, any of us as mediums, as sensitives, if we continue to do our work, continue to do our personal development, continue to live our human lives and work towards being better versions of ourselves all the time. For me, sitting in meditation is a part of my regular practice and allows me, not always, but sometimes, to have these types of experiences. So I just want to encourage you in your own journey, whatever that means for you. I'll tell you, even 15 years ago, I would have not imagined doing this work in this way or being able to communicate with this incredible soul in this way. So just because if this isn't happening for you today, doesn't mean it will never happen. Doesn't mean you can never do it. It just might be some learning and some experience to have around it. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Spirit Speakeasy. I want to mention a couple things really fast. If you've not already gotten my course, the 3-day Sign Magnet free mini course, I highly recommend it. Lots of people have given great feedback about it. It's going to teach you how to use numbers as signs and the specific meanings of all the numbers, like the recurring numbers, 333, 1111, 555, all of those. And then some few different extra tips and tidbits of how to use the numbers and how I use them for signs. And then how to get specific signs from the universe. Like if you're just wrestling with something or you just want to know, like, is this for me? Like, should I seize this opportunity, or which apartment should I pick, or, whatever else is that you've got a question about, there's a way to get a sign from spirit to specifically answer a question that you've got. So I teach that in one of the lessons. And in the third lesson, I teach how to get a specific sign from any loved one in the spirit world. And I even teach you that you can get a different sign from each and every loved one you have in the spirit world if you want to, and how to set those up over time. So check that out. You can get that right on the homepage of my website, joyfulmedium.com. And there's you'll see it right on that homepage. You just drop your email and it comes right into your email inbox as a free gift for you. So I hope you take advantage of that. I probably will have it up there for a bit longer, but if you want it, make sure you get it. Thanks for being here with me today. If you are enjoying this podcast, I would love it if you like and subscribe. And if you feel moved to do so, share any episodes that you feel might speak to any friends. Just because I love having you as a part of this community, and it helps me know what you want to hear about. It helps me understand what you're liking to hear about. And then you never miss an episode, and we all win, right? So it's really meaningful to me that you choose to spend your time with me and that you are part of this community. It's really my intention to create a community for us and to create some trustworthy resources. So I appreciate you for lending your energy to the creation of this community. Without you, the community doesn't exist. You're a valuable member and a huge part of why I do what I do. So thanks for being here with me. So much love and gratitude to, again, the Kumeyaay people, the First Nation, and to you for being here, and to my new friend, this Kumeyaay elder woman. She hasn't given me a specific name for her yet. I just know the way I feel her, and I'm okay. If I think the name is sometimes the least important part about us. So I'm so grateful to her for sharing these experiences with me and giving me permission to share them with you. So thanks for being here today. Again, big hugs, lots of love from inside the Spirit Speakeasy.